Cheers. Oh.
Oh, too slow. There you go.
Cheers.
Excellent.
Amazing. Well, welcome to the Native Movement Half Smoke podcast with Steve and Brittany, and I'll hand it off for another amazing professional welcome.
What do two herrings say when they're passing each other?
I don't know.
Yow hey. So yow is the Tlingit word for herring, and you know, in a Tlingit way, it's kind of funny because it's kind of a play on a number of tunes and songs that we have, and so it's very definitely a dad joke, but you know, it's spawning season. Tlingit dad joke. Oh yeah, you know, the kind of thing that you have when you're enjoying half smoked.
And we're here on the ocean with
Steve Johnson. Íxt'ík, Kiks.ádi my Tlingit name is Íxt'ík. I am from the Kiks.ádi clan of Sitka.
I'm Brittany Woods-Orrison from Rampart, Alaska, from the Yukon River, and we are in the herring season right now, and you've been giving the title Herring King?
Yeah, you know, a lot of my friends and a lot of people that receive eggs and things from me start calling me the Herring King. I find it's kind of funny and amusing. But now a lot of people are calling me that, so I guess the title sticks.
They say, I've been told from a few different people, you throw a whole forest into the ocean. And for the people who haven't heard of herring or know what season it is or how this process is, you want to paint a picture?
Yeah, so in the springtime, the herring come into Sitka Sound and they school up and they hit the beach and they have a pretty good time. And we enjoy the fruits of their labor, the eggs. And they've been a traditional food for many tens of thousands of years. And we gather them now through a number of different ways. The most popular way is to set hemlock boughs or trees and allow them to spawn on them. And the other popular way is to gather up kelp. We have different kinds of kelp that we gather and use and eat. And it's just a great time to be here. You know, the weather's constantly changing. There's a smell in the air. You can smell the salt and the spawn. And it's just a beautiful time to be in Sitka. And for me, the herring eggs are the sacrament of spring. You know, it's one thing that we look forward to every year. And all herring season long, we all eat eggs every single day. And then when it's done, and it's almost time for salmon season.
Very start of the warm seasons, and the herring in Alaska have become a huge place of trade. They make it throughout the entire state and actually the whole world now, with everyone who's built relationships. And I love hearing stories of bartering and old connections and that strength.
And I operate what we call a community harvest program. And so people come here from all over the state and I take them out on the boat and show them how to do it. And they can take home what they catch. And we also give a lot away to communities that don't have herring runs anymore and to people that can't access the eggs, you know, people in Washington and people in the Ketchikan area and some of these other places that, you know, used to have prolific herring runs but don't anymore. And so now most of the tribal communities are reliant on Sitka to provide that sacrament of spring.
Where was your start into this whole world of herring?
You know, some of my earliest memories of childhood are of herring and being out in the boat with my dad and my uncle and learning about them. But, you know, I never really thought of it as that way. I just had a good time playing with them and enjoyed setting branches and the process. And I've refined it over the years too so that I can get the kind of production that I need to meet the demand, which seems to be insatiable every year. But we do our best, and there's a lot of good people and a lot of good volunteers that come and help out, and That's what makes a community harvest great, is spending time together with your friends and like-minded people, and also feeding tens of thousands of people. So there's a lot of good things happening here.
Yeah, when you said my earliest memories, I can always remember the first time I tried herring in the interior, and luckily to have family down here where we could barter moose or caribou. And it's one of those taste and textures and just all of its encompassing where it just takes over my whole memory when I get that flashback of the first time I tried it, and always excited to exchange it, and how lucky we are as Native people when we're able to still fish and, stay connected with the land, and so critical to our health. And we were just discussing earlier how it's interesting that the barriers that have come with colonization to accessing our food. So just amazing that you're able to have this volunteer program that encourages people to get back on the water, get back on the land, and share the abundance and create a cycle of abundance, and share with everyone around the world.
Mm-hmm. And it has grown too. There's a number of people that have their own boats and things now and have their own little programs. And so that's really nice to see too. The more people that we have that know how to do these things, the more likely they are to continue. And that's really important to me, is that we have succession in all of these things, not just in harvesting, but in protecting them. And so every generation has to carry a torch. And so right now it's mine, and very soon it will be the next.
Mm-hmm. And I was able to hear more of your story about how you're able to protect the herring, or what you're doing to protect these lifeways and bring more people in. If you wanted to share some of the ways you navigate that. And also, I've always known Sitka as the place for herring, and I didn't realize that other places had lost that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and really in not so distant history, within the past 20 years or so, a lot of communities have lost their herring runs. And Sitka being the last, final stronghold, it's really important that we protect and conserve these. And that's a political process, and that's something that you have to learn and have to navigate and be adept at. And it's really difficult at times, because we see these things in a very linear, cut and dry area that, we look at all of these runs that have collapsed, that no longer have fisheries and things, and then we look at ours and we want to protect that. But sometimes getting policy and decision makers to agree with that is difficult, if it happens at all. And that's one of the things that is a constant battle. My grandfather worked on herring, my dad worked on herring, and now here I am. And to our tribal way of thinking, it shouldn't be that way. We shouldn't have to work to protect these things this way, but that's the world that we live in. And so, every board of fish cycle, we're there in the front row, and we're ready for class. But I look forward to the day when these things become inherent to our Alaska way of life, and not have to be in competition for foreign markets or dollars or these other things that we've grown accustomed to in Western life. To us, it's food, it's sharing, it's family, and it doesn't have the same equality with a dollar bill to our way of thinking. And so it's up to every one of us to do what we can to protect what we have and to maintain these things the best that we can. And we do gain a little bit of ground here and there, and sometimes we lose some, and that's just the way it is. But it's important to just keep at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that with our Alaskan Native people, we measure our wealth by how much we give, and we protect lifeways and foodways and our lands so that we can share more, and we want to share more. We want to bring more people in. And it was cool to hear about how you had seen these spaces and you realized a lot of decision makers were not harvesting or had not experienced that. And so that's how you decided to finally step into those spaces. And if you wanted to share maybe that journey for other people who are so big into subsistence or so big into policy, balancing both worlds with their skill sets and knowing both.
It's an education process to learn how to catch and how to process and how to maintain these things. And it's very difficult to explain every step of the process to people that have no concept of it. And anytime I travel south and people want to, talk about the weather or talk about fishing, and I start talking about these kinds of things, and you can just kind of see the disconnect and the bewilderment. Like, they've not seen them, they've not experienced them. Most kids in Alaska, when they're drawing pictures of seals and fish and that sort of thing. And you go down south, and most kids are drawing pictures of cats and hamsters and dogs.
Yeah.
And so, from a very young age, we are very aware of the food that's around us and its importance in our lives and in our history. And that also translates to our future. So that's the thing that we have to do, is to build some succession into these things so that future generations will recognize their importance and will want to protect them, but also practice them, do them. And much of our Western upbringing tries to tell us that these things are not really that important, but in reality, they are extremely important. And for tens of thousands of years, I mean, if it wasn't for the importance of these things, none of us Alaska Natives would be here. We'd have been wiped out with time. And so this ability to know how to harvest food and how to live and how to survive here is not only part of who we are in our culture, but part of our very survival. You can't begin to convey the gravity of these things to people who have no concept of it, who can just go through a drive-through and eat whatever they want. And not us. I mean, our survival here is dependent on our skills in catching food and cutting firewood and generating heat and building homes. And that's very much a part of our history and our way of life. And we have to remember these things, and we have to pass them on. And there are times where we may need them in the future. And that's why it's important.
Yeah. Growing up, we were always showed life skills, survival skills, and being from lands that are so unforgiving, weather, big animals, starvation times. It's all extremely challenging, but that's what brought our community together and what made us so knowledgeable and caring. And Alaska is just unlike any other place. And the other thing is, we always think holistically with the generations of plants, the generations of animals, thinking into the future weather, where we need to move, how we need to do all that, and being extremely nomadic. And I love that about Native people at that time, is there's still all of these traits. You're sharing all the places you've lived in Alaska and gone to, and all the different creative solutions you're thinking for your community and projects you want to do, and how many things you have in the queue. If you wanted to share that, you're one of those uncles that is doing a little bit of everything and anything. So if you wanted to share about that life, how it is.
One of the things for me is that I could get a desk job, or I could get a regular 9 to 5, and I could have a paycheck and a middle-class life. But then I wouldn't have this lifestyle. I wouldn't have the ability to, go gather fur or go gather food, or to build a business based around food. On the commercial fishing side, I harvest salmon and I smoke them and I distribute them through a website called www.tradishfish.com.
Tradishfish.com.
And it's modeled after our traditional way of fishing, but also FDA approved, so that you have a shelf-stable product and it's ready to eat right out of the package. And so much of our industry in fishing has changed, and it's one of the adaptations that we have to make, is to stay ahead of that curve and not necessarily be reliant on foreign markets and politicians and things to protect our livelihood, but to take an active role in generating revenue for our small towns and villages and communities. And so that's something I've done, and I'm really looking forward to where it goes and how far it goes. And I hope that one day a lot of other fishermen can do the same thing and be able to generate revenue from their products so that they too can afford to live here. Alaska has a very expensive cost of living, and even if you're gathering your own food and living by a lot of your own resources, it's still really expensive to live here. Housing, electricity, all those modern conveniences that we enjoy, they come at a considerable cost. And so you have to be able to support that. And hopefully support it doing something that you love and enjoy.
And you're being part of that for your community, where you're breaking the barriers by allowing people onto your boat, and you're trying to increase that capacity and get new boats. And I want to acknowledge that you actually worked on this boat since you were a teen.
Yeah. You know, this boat belonged to a very prominent subsistence harvester, John Littlefield. And when it came up on the market, I had to grab it. So it's been a good boat to me. I am kind of outgrowing it, but there's some nephews in line that are eyeballing it. So its legacy will continue.
Yeah. How is it transitioning from nephew to uncle in this world, and what do you see next for our people?
Well, I'd like to think that my jokes are funnier than my uncle's were. But they're probably just as excellent.
Very excellent.
One of the things about herring eggs that I really love is eating them fresh out of the water, you know, while they're still dripping in salt water. And you get that crunch and that sound and that salty blast. It's just amazing. It's one of the greatest foods ever. And it's interesting, too, you can eat them all day and really not get full. You know, they have very little calories, but they have lots of omega-3 oils and protein, and they're really good for you.
Here we are with the herring eggs. With the mic.
Mm-hmm.
Salty, crunchy.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the best things about them. Like the popcorn of the ocean.
Incomparable to anything else I've had.
One of the nice things about working with subsistence foods here is that I don't have to be economically driven by it, and so I have more time and more patience that I can experiment and play with things. And I'm hoping to write a little book on quality guidelines for handling herring eggs pretty soon.
Books, how-tos.
Yeah.
Bringing more people in through
Right.
every educational format.
Right.
Hands-on.
Right. Yeah, no, it's really important to pass this knowledge on and to make sure that it doesn't go away. And, you know, the way that I do things too is probably a little unorthodox, but it's nice to share that too. And, you know, I think it's better for the herring.
It's the generation of creative natives. We've always been creative anyway. We have had to be in STEM to learn all of how to harvest these animals, and so we're just, again, one of those things we're continuing on in a new context.
Yeah, and we have, you know, some concerns in these generations that some of our ancestors didn't. I mean, we have some parasites and things that they never had to deal with, and so, you know, the way that some of the traditional methods of processing food now are no longer safe, and so we have to kind of work with that, and it's just part of the times that we live in. You know, in particular, the redworm and the sockeye and things. I mean, that's really something that we have to be worried about. So, in the old days, we could eat half-smoked fish, but now it might not be safe. You could end up with worms.
Yeah, with everything you're doing, because you already live in the dream, you said, with everything you're doing, you have the schedule you want, you're able to do all of your traditional work lifestyle and still do what you need to advocate. What is this all leading to? What are you hoping? What's the vision, the dream?
Well, I wouldn't say that I get to do everything I want to do. I would love to just make artwork and put headdresses together and carve and sew furs and things together, but you know, the economics get in the way. You got to spend a bunch of time now generating revenue, and so the things that don't get pushed aside a little bit. And I could be working as an engineer on a tanker or a big ship right now, and I could have, a big paycheck, but I would be halfway across the world somewhere and not doing the things that I enjoy, harvesting food and giving it away and that sort of thing. So, I've kind of reached the age too where I'm starting to think more about having my own family and things. And so I've been working towards that, getting a place on land and furnishing it well and developing income streams that can support that kind of thing. So
Creative native solutions on the way.
I guess so.
Buying that land back, getting bigger boats.
Yep. Yeah, that's the thing. The fisheries have really taken a hit. And so being able to have access to bigger and better equipment is more of a reality now than it was before. So have you ever set branches for
I
herring
have
eggs?
not. It's
Okay.
been a dream, a vision, a hope, a prayer.
Well, we're going to have to check that box for you next year. You're going to have to come back. And one of the things I would love to do is to make like a little how-to video about it so that people can watch it and have the idea of how to do it, but also so this information lives on in multiple forms, not just in the young people that learn, but that, older people who may not have had access to it can also learn about it and maybe come to town and participate.
New age ancestor over here.
Yeah.
All the ways of teaching so that they live on.
Yep. But you want to look for a hemlock tree that has a particular amount of size to it and a nice bushiness and a certain type of needle that I look for. And you cut that tree down and you tie an anchor around the top of it and you tie it with enough string so that it floats off the bottom. You don't want it rolling in the sand or the dirt or the eggs will get really dirty. And then you put a little float on it and you find the area where the herring are just about to spawn. And over time you begin to learn the different kind of currents and things that they like. And so you set up a bunch of little sets there in a really close area, and that's how you get the really big eggs. And so I do about 30,000 pounds a year that get distributed all over the place. And so I work with tribes and food banks and organizations to make sure that, they get to the people that want them. And one of the reasons I started doing that is when I was a younger person, I saw some of the eggs getting black marketed, and it really struck me to see older people who could no longer afford or no longer had the physical ability to go out and get foods, that people were taking advantage of that for top dollar. And so one of the first things I wanted to do was to undercut it by giving them everything that they wanted. And it's just kind of grown from there. And over the past 20 years or so, I've been really fine-tuning this idea of community distribution every year. And it's reached a point now that so many people benefit from it. And we just sent 3,000 pounds down to Ketchikan this last weekend, and they gave it all away to all their tribal citizens. And that's one of the communities that used to have a herring run and no longer does anymore. And so there were some people there that hadn't had herring eggs in over 20 years since their herring had vanished.
Wow.
And so just hearing some of those stories and things and seeing the pictures from it and seeing how happy people are to get it, I mean, the feeling that you get from that is immense. And the amount of appreciation that the volunteers and the people that help out and the people that donate to make it possible, it's something that everybody feels so good about. And I love it. And I love doing it every year. And hopefully I can continue to do it for the next few years.
Everything about it is so healing, from eating it, returning to it, harvesting, being in community, learning that knowledge. Even when you're sharing this stuff, I was like, wow, that someone had to figure that out. Someone had to create a solution for that. So
yeah, and getting it just right is a skill set, It's not just as simple as splashing a tree and then bringing in a wealth of eggs. There's quite a bit of fishing knowledge that's involved in how to get these things set up just right. And that's the stuff that I really want to continue on.
And labor.
Oh yeah. The amount. Let's not forget the amount of physical labor.
How many boats is that in how many trips?
Well, I can hold
estimate.
I can hold about 4,000 pounds on here, and so we usually have several distinct spawns, and so I try and do all the bigger organizations and things on the first one. And then the second one, I take care of the others, places like the elder houses and things. So I really like to spend a bunch of careful time and get like kelp and things that they really enjoy. You know, a lot of older people, their teeth aren't in good shape anymore, and so they can't chew on the branches like they used to. But the eggs on kelp are teeth friendly. So
Food for everyone.
yeah, I love it. The community harvest program gives away eggs to people, and working with the organizations and things makes it possible. And it's one of the most beautiful things you've ever seen, where these big totes and bags of herring eggs show up in a community and everybody lines up and they get to take from that and they get to take it home and share it with their families. And to me, it's really the sacrament of spring. I mean, when I explain these things to people that have never seen them, they don't know about them, I say, this is a religious experience to us. This marks the start of the new year to so many people. Winter is done, you know, the salmon are coming soon. Economic prosperity is a little bit better in the summer in Alaska, and all the good things are just coming right around the corner. But it all begins with the herring egg, the sacrament of spring.
And as you were saying, balancing being able to do the traditional life and having all these having tradish fish, the herring harvest is all labor of love. There is no money made. This is just to reconnect the people back. Almost the new year, the spring feels like a new point of the year.
Yeah, we have so many volunteers that come to town and help, and it's illegal to sell herring eggs, and so it's a fun time for people to get together and to harvest and to give them away. And I guess I'm the herring king.
The herring king. How are you able to get all the gas, and if there's any maintenance, is there a support network for that, or are you just up the...
When I first started doing it, it was largely supported by Bank of America at 18%.
Wow.
I got a line of credit that I would utilize every year. But we get a fair amount of donations, and some of the organizations help out too. And so it's really grateful that, they'll buy bags and fuel and, boxes and things to ship, and they'll cover shipping. And so all of these things are really, really great for communities.
Is there anywhere people can plug in if they're listening and want to support that process?
I have a Facebook group called Herring Harvesters. And if you want to look at all the pictures from all our harvesting activities, and if you want to see how it goes, and if you want to come and participate, there's a link in there to do so. And so just find us on Facebook.
From anywhere in the world?
Yeah.
You did say if you buy tickets to Sitka, everything else is taken care of.
Yeah, and generally speaking, I have space on a couch. And so, we put a lot of people up during herring season. There's been as many as 20 people sleeping in my little house.
What?
Yeah.
Traditional.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. People with tents in the backyard, in the front yard, in the side yard.
Who's cooking?
Me.
Wow.
Yeah. Crock-pot's always got something in it during herring season. And we make a lot of breakfast burritos in advance. And so there's always good stuff to eat. And there's a joke in the fleet that Steve has the only boat where the crew gain weight.
Yeah.
They take good care of people.
Yay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And, there's times too where people just camp out at the beach by the sets. It's a little bit cold this time of year, but people do it sometimes. So we're happy to have that too. Land in Alaska is really expensive, but I kind of have this goal to build a floating fish camp so that I could just anchor it up, during herring season or during sockeye season. And people can stay on board and process their food on board, learn about it, and, just spend a week in summer and get your sockeye and learn how to do it.
I see it. Yeah. I hope all your dreams come true.
Yeah.
Every vision you're sharing, I'm like, that should happen.
It should.
That makes sense.
I love it. I'm really happy to share these things with you, and I'm really glad you guys came down. And, hopefully we get a chance to get out in the water, and then you can see it firsthand.
Oh, we'll be back. I
really appreciate the time here, and thank you to the viewers. And look us up on Facebook. And I hope your day is amazing.